Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Lunatics. It's me, Phil. Lilith is here, and we've got another friend of the show who probably spends way too much time with us. He's very generous with his time, Mr. J M
way too much
DeMatteis.
time. I'm leaving. It's like I can't do this again.
I'm always like, oh, he's probably writing like 5 things right now. I can't, should I bother him? He's writing probably 5 books right now. But we are here because he has a new project, Spider-Man 94. But before we get into that, he's versed in many of these characters. But yes, today, as we're recording this, it is Batman Day. So I know you have a relationship with that character too in many forms of media.
Many forms over many years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I posted today that the very first Batman story I ever wrote was a coloring book. When I was just starting out at DC, and Paul Levitz hired me to do this Batman coloring book, and I was very, very happy to get the gig. I got to tell you, and I'll post about it periodically, and there'll always be these people like, "I had that when I was a kid. I had that coloring book," So it's a fun thing. And many Batman stories over the years in comics and animation, and most recently I've been writing for the Batman Cape Crusader show, with the second season's coming up soon, I hope. So it's been over a year since the first season hit, and I've got an episode there, and hopefully more ahead if they come back for more seasons.
Yeah, that was very good. I mean, especially your episode. But yeah, that the weird thing with streaming. It's like, yeah, it could be out next week, could be out next year. You never know.
Yeah. But I think it's been a year since I think the first season came out last August. So it must be coming soon.
Yeah. But with the coloring book, do you what kind of notes do you get on a coloring book?
I don't think I got any notes particularly. I went home, I wrote the thing. Paul read it. He said, "Oh, this is good." And the comic, it was Western Publishing, I guess, did the coloring books. They loved it, and off it went. And I still, somewhere on my shelf, I have a copy tucked away somewhere. I still have one.
I heard something the one time where someone, I forget who, was saying that it's like probably writing for young children is the most difficult thing, because you have to have like a compelling story for them, but you can't go like, you can't have concepts that are too
well in a coloring book. I mean, it's
yeah.
It's as simple as you can possibly make it. And yet the trick was, from what I remember from 150,000 years ago, is you still had to tell a story. It wasn't just like pictures of Batman and Robin. It had to be a story. And you had to tell it in a way that, lay out the pages so that there's something fun for them to color on that page, So it was a challenge. But as I recall, I think I wrote it in a night. I just stayed up late, wrote my coloring book, and brought it in the next day. And I'm thinking now, as we're talking about it with Batman, I think the first actual superhero story I ever did for DC was a Batman story in Detective Comics, which is probably like a 10-page story. And the first full-length superhero story I did was a Brave and the Bold issue with Batman and Hawkman. So a lot of Batman. And, last year I did the Robin Lives series. So I've been, and animation. I did 2 Batman animated movies. I wrote for Batman, Brave and the Bold. Justice League Unlimited had Batman in it. I mean, a lot of Batman. A lot of Batman.
So you kind of know Batman a little bit. So
yes, and a lot of other Bat projects along the way. Not to mention him in JLI.
Oh yes. And I know you mentioned Going Sane from Legends of the Dark Knight.
Yeah, one of my all-time favorite projects. Yeah.
So I know that's on the DC app. Did they ever collect that?
They collected it maybe 10 years ago. I mean, it's time. Time is like this weird amorphous blob now. But it went out of print, and they never brought it back in print. And I would love to see that recollected, because that story means a lot to me. And beautiful, beautiful art by Joe Staton, ink by Steve Mitchell. Really, really nice work, and a really special story for me.
Yes, and I mean, good story too. But I mean, it is the Joker. I mean, who likes Batman and Joker stories? I mean, come on.
And it's a very different Batman and Joker story. It's not a typical Batman Joker story. Yeah.
But so like I was going to say, you have a lot of experience with this character. Why is he so popular? Is it just because the human side, because he has no powers and people can relate to that? Or even these days, I mean, for a loner, I think he has more sidekicks than any character in pop
Right,
culture.
I know. It's really, really funny
Is
that,
it a family thing
it's
now?
like what they've done with, it's the same thing has happened with Spider-Man. You know, Spider-Man is the loner in the Marvel universe, and he's got like 150,000 other Spider characters. And yeah, it's sort of like what the Batman comics were, especially like in the 50s and 60s, you know, when it was, you know, Batman and Batgirl and Bathound and Batmite and this Bat and that Bat, and, you know, um, yeah, it is interesting because, you know, the character has gone through so many evolutions over the years too, and even in terms of when I've written the character, you can write Batman a lot of different ways. You know, is he the dark psycho version of Batman that we've seen? Is he the really lighthearted version from Batman Brave and the Bold? And every sort of incarnation in between. I don't really subscribe to Psycho Batman. I think he's traumatized, but I think he is at his core a good and decent and compassionate guy, and really ultimately a symbol of light for Gotham City. He's not just one psycho fighting a bunch of other psychos, you know.
Mm.
But yeah, but he seems to survive through all these incarnations, as all the classic characters do. You know, Superman in 1939 is not the Superman of today by any stretch. But there's some essence there. There is some essence there, and you know, it's hard to put your finger on it. It's like these things, you know, they kind of resonate in the collective consciousness. Like I always say, it's like we get a Batman or a Superman because for some reason we all need that symbol in our lives, you know, and that maybe 1,000 years ago in some other myth, the same energy that appears now as Batman appeared as some other god or some other character that people responded to. But now for our modern age, you got Batman and Superman and Spider-Man because there's some need in us for these characters to fulfill something in us and for us to project something of ourselves onto these characters. But yeah, you know, Batman's popularity doesn't ever seem to end.
Was it because he's been around for so many decades, and it's like everyone has their favorite version in their head, and as a
Right, but there's a reason why he's lasted. You know what I
oh
mean? You know, right? You go back to, you know, those of us. I was in junior high school when the Adam West show came on. You know, and that's like that was Batman for a lot of people. Also ruined Batman for a lot of people afterwards, but we loved it at the time. You know, um, and the character mutates, but I think that there's some essence there that resonates with us. You know, some. And you know, on one level, it's just, you know, it's Gotham City, larger than life, a great rogues gallery. But lots of characters have great rogues galleries, and there's just some essence, some indefinable essence that really resonates, resonates with all of us for some reason.
well, it is such a, I don't want to say simple story, but it's something everyone can relate to. You know, just the tragedy of his origin, and then just building himself up into the man he needs to be or wants to be.
Right, he is the, you know, despite the fact that he's a multimillionaire, if not a billionaire in today's dollars, you know, he is a self-made man in his own way. You
Yeah.
know, you know, it helped that he had a fortune to help him make himself, but he was a self-made man. There is something to that, right? All these other guys are flying around with all these powers, and he's like, no, I'm just going to put on this suit, and I'm going to be better than all of you. And you know, I think a lot of these characters, for all of us in some way, psychologically, represent our own potential. You know, I always see Superman as the embodiment, as I'm not the only person who said this, a million people have said this. He's the embodiment of the best of us, you know, that we project the best of us onto him, and then he inspires us in turn. And Batman, maybe that's it. Maybe it's the fact that, you know, you don't need superpowers to make a difference in the world, you know, which is why, of course, most of us at night put on a costume and go prowl the city.
Yeah, that's true.
Hi.
Uh, uh, so yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I figured you would have thoughts on Batman because
Yeah,
since
yeah.
this is Batman Day. I did see your post about the coloring book and everything, and I was like, okay, so yes, early on he had
Yeah, and you know, one of my earliest memories of being a kid was sitting there with a Batman comic, you know, probably in the early '60s, you know, with my on the floor with my crayons and my paper, and I used to do freehand. I would try to copy that cover down to every detail, you know, and you know, when you think about what Batman was in, say, 1960, when it was still that sort of quote Bob Kane version, which was really Dick Sprang and all those other guys, very different, very different. And yet the character evolves, and yet something stays the same. There's some need in us, and something that character fulfills that's kind of magical and transcendent in its way.
Oh yeah.
Well, let me ask you,
Hmm.
which version of Batman do you like the best? Do you like him when he's like the super dark psycho? Do you like him when he's more human and vulnerable and compassionate?
I don't like the super psycho version of him. Maybe a little darkness, but again,
Yeah,
it's more like the psychological aspect of, oh, I got to make my enemies think I'm something more than human.
right. You know, I wrote a Batman graphic novel. Oh God, it's got to be 20 something years ago now, called Absolution. And one of the themes that I played with in there is that, yeah, Batman is just a role. The problem for Bruce Wayne is sometimes, there's an old Kurt Vonnegut line: "We are what we pretend to be." If you pretend to be that thing long enough, you start to become it. And I think that's one of the things he has to wrestle with in his life. He is not this dark, psycho, crazy Avenger creature of the night. He's a human being. But
Mhm.
if you play that role long enough, there's a danger of going over that line. And that's another interesting aspect of the character.
Yeah, it's always that fine line between the good he's doing plus obsession, because it seems like
Right.
from the night his parents are murdered, it's just like, I have to be this thing, I have to do this thing.
Right. And then, the different interpretations. The one interpretation is that basically that trauma is what drives him through everything for the rest of his life. That's all it is. It's just he's responding to that trauma. Whereas I see it in the best version of Batman for me. Yes, that was a great trauma. Yes, that motivated him. But he's been able to, you can't ever let go of a trauma like that, but he's not defined by that trauma. There's more to him than just this guy putting on a costume because he's been traumatized. I always used to joke, and actually when we did the Robin Live series last year, we kind of got there with the story,
Mhm.
that the reality is, what Bruce Wayne needs is to go to therapy and use his billions of dollars to help the world in a more intelligent
See,
way.
I told you, Phil.
But
What?
it's a. I'm sorry. What'd you say?
That's been our long running joke, though. That's a
Right.
lot of people's jokes. Like, if you just
Yeah.
got therapy and maybe gave some of that money back to Gotham.
Right. Exactly. He could do a lot of good in the world. And I kind of ended the Robin Lives miniseries with Batman doing just that. Um, but it's a comic book, and this character has to live on and have adventures and be Batman, and we want him to be Batman. So of course you can't do that. That's the thing with any serialized character. You can take them to a certain point, but you can't take them beyond that point, because if they grow beyond a certain point, they can't go back and be the character that has to live on in those comics and movies and TV shows and novels for the next 50 years, long after we're all gone.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think you're the man to ask this. I was thinking about this before. Just if Bruce Wayne was in therapy for at least once a week, would there still be a Batman? Because again, he's the original. This tragedy is baked into my origin. But there's like so many characters now. It seems like I don't know if like the companies or whatever feel like they have to have this tragic reason to be a hero, because like we've discussed this before. Barry Allen used to just be a hero because it was the right thing to do, but then they had to give him oh, my mother was murdered, my father
Right,
was killed,
right,
all
right,
this.
right. So the question is, do you need a trauma to be a superhero?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't think you do. Look at the Fantastic Four. Did they? Well, I mean, they got turned into these things, but they're not traumas lurking in their past that are motivating them to be these heroes. So no, I don't think you need a trauma. As a writer, a little bit of trauma goes a long way. It makes the characters interesting, and you can play with it. But characters can be interesting without trauma. This is coming from a writer who loves to lean into trauma in all the stories, but no, you don't need it. It's not a necessary ingredient. Oh, that was funny. A necessary ingredient.
But I'm just like, I guess any version, because again, it's like the Adam West, like you brought up the Adam West show. It's like,
Yeah, that Batman was not traumatized at all.
no,
Not in the
he
least.
mentions the parents' death in like the first like what minute of the first episode.
Do they even mention it? They do. Yeah.
No.
He says something about, oh, my he's giving a speech to somebody, and he's like, oh, my parents were taken by crime or whatever, and they never mention it through the series ever again. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just
You
like
know,
one line he throws out in the beginning of the first episode. That's it.
and yet that is the definitive Batman for a certain generation of people. It's an
Mhm.
amazing thing.
Oh yeah, I remember even when I was a kid, like they play that in syndication like during
Right.
every day during the week. Yeah, so it's kind
And for me, at that age when that show came on, I mean, there hadn't been really superhero TV, and certainly no big superhero movies or anything like that. I mean, I grew up with reruns of the Adventures of Superman, the George Reeves show, which I love, but that Batman show was the first time I ever saw anything on TV or in a film that looked like a comic book. I still remember seeing the trailers for it before it even came on, and there was a scene with this, the Riddler exploding out of this giant elephant, or I forget, whatever it was, and it's like, holy, that looks just like a comic book come to life. So it was a thrill as a kid to see anything that even resembled a comic book come to life on screen.
Oh yeah, it probably works as it was based on a comic book because they did want it like bright and
Yeah.
Because they said that I think that and Star Trek sold so many like color TVs.
Yes, yeah, that's right. People forget that was a big transition from black and white to color. For a long time when I was growing up, that's what we had. We had a black and white TV, and you would just project the color. I remember these stores that used to sell this little plastic sheet you could stick onto your TV, and it had like gradations of color on it. It wasn't color that matched anything that was on the TV, but it would put some color in front of the image, Probably sold it for $1.99 or something.
Oh, geez. We've come so far. Now I have to explain to my 12-year-old. Yes, we had to take our media and put it in a player to like watch it back in the day. If we,
I could do the old man thing. Go, we had to get up and change the channel ourselves. We didn't have a remote control. It went click, click, click.
I was the remote control.
Right, exactly. Your parents would say, "Go change the channel," right?
Oh, and then what are your thoughts on God? What is it, like another 10 years or something? Batman's going to enter the
That's going to be really interesting when those characters start flipping over into the public domain. Just like what happened with Mickey Mouse. And I'm sure you're going to see all kinds of crappy, awful, sleazy, like what as soon as they did Winnie the Pooh went into the public domain, they did Winnie the Pooh slasher movies. It's like, come on, guys, this is the only thing you can think of to do. The flip side is that I guess a lot of creative people who get to do their own versions of Batman based on that. You can only do it based on that character from that year. Mm-hmm. They can't bring in any elements that weren't in that period of time, and he has to look like that and all that. And then there are all these kind of, I don't understand the law. There's all these kind of trademarked elements so that you can use it, but you kind of can't use it. So I think it's more complicated than we think it is. Yeah. When that rolls around, and when you have these giant corporations, get between them and a profit, and God knows what'll happen.
Yeah.
As we've seen politically recently.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes.
Don't get between me and my money.
Oh, my. I mean, I think it's been away for a while, but I think they're not as subtle about it anymore now.
No, exactly. It's like, well, let's see. On one hand, we have democracy. On the other hand, we have profit. Okay, goodbye, democracy. Let's move along here.
All right. I was going to say, we'll get to Spider-Man 94. But speaking of Spider-Man, I did see... we talked about this a few times, but I guess they're finally collecting your Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah, it came out like a month or so ago. Yeah, I'm so happy to see that finally out in the world. I've been waiting literally decades for this book to come out, and it's one of my absolute favorite things I've ever done in comics is that run with Sal Buscema. So it's just an absolute delight to have that out in the world, and I know a lot of other people were waiting for it as well. So
how do they decide when it gets collected?
I have no idea. For the longest time, I'm just like everybody else. The solicits come out every month, and I'm like, did they collect it yet? Because half the time I see this work of mine being collected, I don't know until I read it in the solicits, unless they specifically ask me to write an introduction. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it's a surprise to me half the time. And luckily, I was gently harassing my Spider-Man editor, Danny Chasm, for a long time. Find out, are they ever going to collect this? So finally he called me up one day and he said, don't tell anybody, but they're collecting it. And I was just so happy. And, because I have on my shelf over there, they did a Spectacular Spider-Man omnibus in Poland like 3-4 years ago. I have editions from Italy and other countries, and they'd never collected it here. And why? What is the decision-making process? I have no clue. I'm just happy to see it out in the world.
Yeah. You always think, Batman, Spider-Man, that's a no-brainer. They should. You figured they'd be collecting that as quick as they could.
Or
whatever. So that's an omnibus, right? So is that your entire run? I forget how long your
That's
run.
the entire, but we did, Sal and I did 2 years on that book. So the whole 2 years is in there, plus a bunch of other Sal stories from afterwards. And also a story I did with Mike Zeck called Soul of the Hunter, which was a sequel to Craven's Last Hunt, is also in there. It's big. It's really, really big. I was just saying to somebody, I get these copies of these, I guess the plural is omnibuses. I guess it's not omnibi, it's omnibuses. And I have to start moving everything around in my office to find shelf space. And it's now spilled over into another room in my house and other shelves because they take up so much space. But I'm happy to have them. It's not a complaint. I'm delighted to have them.
You talk about it with a lot of people, but now once you start getting those big collections, you're like, man, I read a lot of comics.
Yeah, that's right.
But yes, yes, the reason we did come together is, yes, you have a new Spider-Man project, Spider-Man 94, basically a follow-up to the animated series of the 90s, which I love these covers. I mean, there's more than this, but
I know. There's like so many covers out there. I don't even know half of them. There's just so many out there, but they're all really good.
Oh, yeah.
I love the toy ones that they're doing with the action figures.
Oh yeah, and then that one on the right's like an homage to Spider-Man Unlimited from the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great.
So did they come to you and say, because I guess I saw people clamoring for for them to do a new version of the animated series after
how they did for X-Men.
X-Men, as X-Men 97 first season was on, everyone's like, well, are we gonna do Spider-Man next? Are we gonna do Spider-Man next?
Yeah, I assume that was the thinking behind the scenes. No one explained that to me, but I assume that X-Men 97 was a big hit, and they thought this was a logical next step for them to do. I would love to see them actually bring the series back. Give John Semper the keys and let him go tell more stories in animated form. But right now, this is the version you're getting, like it or not.
I was gonna say, we got a man right here who's worked in animation. I mean, I'm sure you would.
Yeah, I would love, if they brought this show back to work on it. Of course, yeah, I've been doing so. Animation has been a huge part of my career the past 20 years or so. Yeah,
I'm sure you can't confirm or deny, but I have a feeling if this sells well, they might do more of this because of the whole Mary Jane storyline. Because
right, I can't confirm or deny because honestly, I don't know. I know that the first issue sold very well from what I've heard. And if we do another one, the story I would like to do is to finally tell the story of how Peter found Mary Jane and they got back from wherever it was she was. I have the story in my head. I know the story I want to tell. Will we get to tell it? I don't know. If enough people buy this, there's a good chance we will.
I figured that was going to be what you'd say, but I was going to say, so you do have the story in your mind already?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, originally, when we were first talking about this, that's what we talked about. Let's do that story, and I came up with a pitch on that story, and then somewhere along the line, somewhere up the food chain, someone made a decision to hold off on that story and just take it from this point of them just getting back. I guess maybe to leave a little bit of mystery hanging in the air and something to encourage people to want another miniseries. I honestly don't know what the thinking was, so I can't really speak to that. Anything I say is as valid as anything you say because I don't know. That was just the decision to pick the story up at this point. But I do hope we get to do the rescuing Mary Jane story.
And at this point, do they give you a lot of notes on this, or are they just like, hey, we need a Spider-Man animated series follow-up? Whatever you want to do, go ahead.
Yeah. My editor is my editor Danny Chasm is very, very well versed in this show, far more well versed than I was, even though I worked a little bit for the show, and I had to really educate myself and watch lots of episodes. But any questions I had, I could just turn to Danny, and basically, was what you do with your editor. We got on the phone, we started tossing ideas around. How about this? How about that? He was the one that suggested bringing Moreland into the story. So they sent me a bunch of Moreland stories so I could educate myself about that character who I didn't really know very well. I knew the general beats. I didn't know all the details. And, we just play. It's just creative play, throwing ideas back and forth. And then once you lock it in, then off I go and I write the series.
and I'm pretty sure Kane was probably your idea, correct? Because I know you do like
Yeah.
Kane,
And again, we're working here within the animated universe, and what John Semper did so well on the show was he adapted these characters. He didn't give us these characters exactly as they were in the comic books. He created new versions of those characters. So my approach here with this series is we are within the animated universe. So even if you see a character that is familiar to you from the comics, it is that character, but it's not. We get to reinvent that character for the animated universe. So that was the fun. It's the Moreland that you know, but it's not that Moreland. It's got his backstory is different. The same thing with Kane. You think Kane is the Kane that you know, but you'll find out that there's more to Kane than the comic book version that we already know.
Is that a little bit of a challenge, just keeping everything straight in your head? Be like, okay, this isn't 616 Spider-Man. This is the
right.
Man.
That's the challenge. Yeah, that is the challenge, because I'm like, okay, we're working in the animated universe. At the same time, this is an animation script. It's a comic book. It's comic book storytelling has certain structure and rules that you have to follow that you can't do in animation, and vice versa. So you have to make it an exciting comic book, but you want to be true to the spirit and the character of the animated show. So it's a fine line. But once I did an issue or two, I think I got in the groove with that and got it all worked out.
But yeah, so you said the first issue did sell well then?
Yes, that's what I think we went to a second printing really quickly.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because it feels like I think, and again, you could probably say this with a lot of these characters, but like I think animated series, whichever one it is always like a lot of people's first contact with Spider-Man. Like I know with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends in the 80s. And with a lot of people, the 90s animated series was like their first contact with Spider-Man.
And that's what I've seen. There is a passionate fan base for this show.
Oh, yeah.
Just the reaction that I've seen, in social media and on my website, and people writing, and well, what about this and what about that? Are you going to resolve this? And how about this guy? And as I learned in my years writing animation in general, I think there's a whole audience of people that really just know these characters from animation. And maybe, they may dip into comics here or there, but they're not comic book fans. They're fans of these characters through animation, just like there are, fans of the Marvel and DC characters through the movies that may never pick up a comic book, which is really a shame. But that explains why the comics aren't selling hundreds of millions of copies when these movies are making hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah. But so there's a very passionate fan base. And so you have to please the comic book audience. Because you want someone who never watched the show to pick the comic up and just enjoy a good story. But you want the people that love the show to pick it up and get something new from that universe that they love.
So again, you have one of the best jobs in the world, because you're like, oh, I got to do research. I have to watch some animation, maybe pick up some or sometimes read some comics. It has to be,
It is. I've often said that over the years. Sometimes like any job can sometimes feel like a job, even if it's the job you wanted your whole life, like doing what I get to do for a living. And then I take a step back and I go, gee, I had to do some work today. I had to watch cartoons and read some comics, and it's like, and the little 10-year-old in my soul goes, what? And screams and does a backflip and then faints from sheer joy, So it's a funny thing. It's a really funny thing.
Can I just take a detour really quick? I just want to say how much I really love your website. Like, it's just like such a great, you always like manage to weave in some history, just some good
thank you,
general behind the scenes knowledge, and it's just so refreshing that it's just not like a constant like self-promotion machine. It is, but like you also get so much more from it.
Oh, thanks. I get to write these little essays sometimes for the introductions for books, or sometimes I just want to look back at something and just write a little essay off on my own. And it's fun, to explore that history and then put it down. I've been thinking about taking a lot of these posts from my website about, especially the ones about comic book history. That's a weird noise. What is that?
Sorry, no, but something went off on my computer. Sorry.
It sounded like an alien was coming to eat us. Anyway, I was thinking of taking these essays and maybe putting them together in a little book or something, and doing a self-published thing just to get this history out there a little bit more broadly. It'd be a fun thing to do.
You read the post for today. Not only is it Batman Day, it's Steve Gerber Day, and I just love that. That's what just got me thinking about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Steve Gerber, man. I have so much love for his work, so much respect for his work. He was a really, really big influence on me. When I was a teenager, at a point when maybe, I would have left comics behind, it was writers like Gerber that kept me going, because as I grew up, the medium grew up with me, and Gerber's stuff was so different and so iconoclastic and so creative and so emotional. I just loved his stuff. Just loved his stuff.
Yeah, because did you work on? Well, I know you and him both did Defenders at different points in time, but
right, yeah, Defenders was one of my first gigs at Marvel when I started at Marvel, and Gerber set the tone for that book, which was, you can do anything you want. He was not. He was very big on just breaking down any barriers that were in his way, which gave me permission as a writer to make Defenders into what I wanted it to be, and do it my own way with my own voice. Yeah. I only got to meet him once, and it was just over a meal once, and we didn't really get to know each other in any way, shape, or form. But I feel like I got to know him through his work. I was asked to write an introduction for the next Marvel Masterworks, which collects the second round of his Man-Thing stories. So I got to write, which will show up on my website, a really long essay about his work and how much it impacted me and how much it means to me, and what a really, really important, I think he's one of the most important writers in the history of comics, for my money. Really, really that significant.
Yeah, I feel that way about a bunch of writers, including yourself. I'm glad I get to talk to you, because I'm just like, these people who've like touched your heart and stuff with these stories, and it's just like, oh yeah, like when a few months ago or a few weeks ago when Peter David passed away, I felt it like someone in my family died, and I was just like, but I talked to the man once on here a few years ago. That's
right.
it.
But stories are very intimate things. I know that the writers that I love, I take those stories very, very deep into my heart. I didn't know Ray Bradbury. I corresponded with him very briefly and spoke to him on the phone once for about 2 minutes, but I didn't know him. But I know him because of those stories that I love so much, that I've taken into the very deepest parts of my soul. And that's the beauty of art, all art, whether it's a book or a comic, a musician. I don't know Paul McCartney, but I know Paul McCartney because that music has been a soundtrack for my entire life, and it's meant so much to me. It's a very intimate thing. I was just talking to somebody I was just at San Diego Comic-Con for the first time in 20 years, and the first convention I'd been to since 2019, since pre-COVID. And really the highlight of the show for me was I did 2 signings for maybe about 2 hours each time. And that's what I really love about conventions, because you get to meet the people that read your work, because they're not going to be online waiting for your autograph if they don't care, So these are people that read and appreciate your work, and they are so open and expressive, and to have that contact is really a wonderful thing, and often really, really touching for me, So it's a really great thing. When I write for myself, first of all, and then I kind of imagine a reader like myself, someone who reads that deeply and takes these stories in. And so when you meet people and you realize that's exactly what happened, that stories mean that much to them, it's a great thing. That was really the highlight of the show for me, was meeting these people.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about this too just a little bit ago. It was like people like you and other writers at the time, like growing up reading your stuff, I'm like, oh, I love these stories. I'm glad they were a part of my formative years. But then you go back and read more, you read it again, and you're like, here's stuff I didn't register with me the first time or 2 or 3 or whatever.
Yeah, and the nice thing about all this stuff being reprinted is that new audiences are finding the work.
Yes,
and that's really great too. When I was at San Diego, these 2 girls came up dressed as Beetle and Booster. They looked like at most they were like 22. So they weren't alive when those original stories were written. Excuse me, 1 second. I need a sip of water.
Oh yeah. Well,
so here they are discovering these stories and loving these characters, and talking to me about some of the stories that were written, decades ago. And it's a great thing. I have people come, well, I just read this for the first time last week. It's a great thing.
Reprinting more and more. There's the apps now. So
yeah,
a lot of people are discovering this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think we're finally filling in those gaps, because for some reason it seems like the 90s, maybe like late 80s and all the 90s were kind of like a I don't know why, like a black hole where like a lot of the stuff wasn't reprinted or
Well,
going
it was
up
a
on
lot
the
of
app.
fucks in the industry too.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I guess I think a
But that
lot.
shouldn't have any impact on what they reprint, right? You know, so
I Yeah, but like Lilith was, it's like we've heard stories. I think sometimes the art would just like disappear or something, or because it seemed like they would have stuff from before that era. They have all the stuff.
yeah,
That,
I don't know why. Like, well, why did Spectacular Spider-Man take so long? When I know, 10 years ago, I have reprints from other countries, so the art was out there. It was scanned. It was printed. They
true.
could have done this 10 years ago. They could have done this 15 years ago. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand the decision-making process, and I'm just grateful when it finally gets out in the world.
Yes.
They just this week released the Scooby Apocalypse Omnibus, which is
Yes.
the very last project I did with Keith Giffen.
Mm.
I'm just really happy to see that out. I've had so much stuff is being either has come out this year or will still be coming out. Things I've waited a long time for.
I'm so glad I'm not the one that had to bring that up because I know I love Scooby Doo, like the comics that DC does for Scooby, but Scooby Apocalypse specifically. I just want to know, why was it a Teen Plus rating? Like,
Oh,
why?
I have no idea. I think just
So
because maybe because it was sort of a horror book, but it wasn't really horrible, in your face blood and gore in any way, shape, or form. But maybe they thought young kids would be too traumatized by the monsters. I don't know. But that was one of those gigs where Keith called me up and said, DC wants us to do blah blah blah. I said, what? Scooby? What? It was like,
crazy
what are you talking?
concept.
It just is like, what are you talking about? But as I always used to say, I would work with Keith on anything. If he would have called me up and said they want us to do Millie the Model, I would have said okay. And I mean that. I would have, because it would have been fun. And it turned into this great gig. We, ran for 3 years. We told a complete story with a beginning, middle, and an end. And we had a lot of fun with it. And it ended up being the last project I ever collaborated with Keith on.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
the fun really showed through that book. I really love that book a lot.
Well, thank you.
well, that's why that magic kept happening with you and Keith, because again, you love it. You just enjoyed working with him, and like you said, you would have worked. I don't care what the character is. I don't. Let's go.
Yeah, sometimes it's the collaboration that is far more important than whatever the project is. And then because I knew if Keith and I were together on this, it was going to be fun and we'd do good work.
Always like a humorous time with working with Keith, because just from that JLI stuff, it seems like I'm sure these guys are like trying to like crack each other up. And
yeah, I mean, it was people always imagine, and we probably talked about this in the past. Keith and I weren't like we were in the same room like a writing team writing this together and laughing our heads off. He wrote the plots, I wrote the scripts, and it was more like a game of tennis. He would volley toward me with the plot, and I'd mess around with it in the script and hit it back to him. He'd build on what I do, I'd build on what he did, and it went from there. And as I've said before, the great thing was, when you get thrown together on a monthly comic book, it's not like you guys know each other or anything. It's just you're the team, the editor puts you together, and you're working together. And we didn't know Kevin. I didn't really know Keith well. We'd been working on the Dr. Fate miniseries together that I wrote and he drew. And then over time, if it works out, like, Keith and I became really good friends over the course of the years. Didn't start out that way. And yet we had that creative chemistry right from the beginning, even without knowing each other well. Something happened on the page, just like something happened on the page with Sal Buscema in Spectacular Spider-Man. And maybe if we'd never, ever spoken to each other, we still would have had that chemistry on the page. But the bonus is when you discover that the person that you're working with is a great person and you get to know them and they become a friend. It's a great thing.
that's great. Yeah, I mean, you could tell just from reading those Justice League issues, that you guys were having a great time and just syncing so well.
Yeah. And I always have to add two things. One is that, the incredible impact Kevin Maguire had on those books. If he had not drawn that first year and a half of Justice League, we may not be talking about that book today. It was so important to have Kevin there. And then our editor, Andy Helfer, who was the glue that held the whole thing together. He really was one of the best editors that ever sat behind a desk at DC.
Just that cover to the first issue. I mean, you see that everywhere, or people are homaging it everywhere.
Yeah, that cover and Kevin has, when you go to conventions, you see Kevin has 150 variations on that cover, with all different characters, from DC characters to Marvel characters to Doctor Who to you name it. all with that camera angle, all with that look on their faces, you know.
All right, I'll detour us a little bit now. I think I saw on social media you did see the Superman movie,
I did indeed.
and I think you enjoyed it.
I liked it a lot, and seeing it the second time when we watched it on TV, I liked it even more. I thought it was terrific, really terrific.
Oh yeah, I did see it's on HBO Max now. I want to go back for my second watch. Yeah, but
Yeah.
how did you feel about their take on Guy Gardner, who you worked with through your?
Oh yeah, I loved it. You know, and it wasn't just Guy Gardner. That whole Justice Gang thing
Yeah.
was a complete JLI vibe. You know, it was absolute total JLI vibe. And I know that James Gunn is a huge JLI fan, and so I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line we see some incarnation of the Justice Gang evolving into JLI.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I thought that Nathan Fillion, perfection as Guy Gardner, absolutely.
I do know he did say his brother, who's playing Max Lord, is like the version of Max Lord you guys did. So
Yes, I was really happy to read that. That it's like, no, we're not going with that other
not evil
darker
Max
version.
Lord. Yeah,
No. This is, you know, he's a bit of a manipulator, but at heart he's a really, really good guy. And actually, this convention I'm going to, GalaxyCon in St. Louis in October, I believe that Sean Gunn is going to be there. So maybe I'll introduce myself to Max along the way.
Oh, you got to get a picture. Yeah, you and Max Lord.
Well, really nice thing. My friend Heath Corson, who's a writer that you may have heard of, works comics and TV. He's working on a comic book project with Nathan Fillion, and so while we were in San Diego, he had me autograph a couple of JLI issues, guy-centric JLI issues, which he gave to Fillion, and he's sent me a great picture of Fillion holding the 2 JLI issues in his hand. It was great.
Oh wow, nice. Speaking of other comic projects, what's going on with the multiverse?
Multiverse, you know, we did our first 2 rounds with all the 5 books, and we are hopefully gearing up to get the 3rd round going. We've had a few bumps in the road in between that slowed us down a little bit, but I am determined to get the 3rd chapters out there and finish off each of these individual miniseries. And then if that's still successful, there are more stories to be told with all these characters down the line. But the first 2 Kickstarters went really, really well. I was really, really happy with the way they turned out. You know, it was such a unique thing to launch 5 different books with these 5 great artists all at the same time. So I'm looking forward to moving forward with the phase 3 of the DeMultiverse. Yeah, I hope in 2026.
So it's up to you. Just you're going to keep going.
Yeah. Unless something happens to stop us along the way, and you never know with you know the economy or this, that, or the other thing that's going on in the world right now. But my hope is that we will continue. You know, I envision each of these as a 4-issue miniseries, but that's not the end of the stories. That's the end of a story for each of these characters. So I could see at least 3 miniseries to tell the whole complete thing for each of these books. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them could go on beyond that.
So now you mentioned that on the business side, do you think is it more attractive to readers these days to do like almost like sets of like, okay, here's 1 through 4 of this arc, here's 1 through 4 of this arc, instead of just like having big issue numbers on covers?
You mean instead of an ongoing?
Yeah. Instead of here's a issue 210.
I see. Yeah, it seems to be that this is, you know, and I'm not sitting behind a desk at Marvel or DC, but it seems to be that they do that because otherwise they wouldn't be rebooting these comics constantly. Also, you know, here's another new #1 of the same comic you've been reading for the past 50 years. You know, there's 2 different things. You know, with a miniseries, you can tell a very concise story with a beginning, middle, and end. But you know, I've worked on a lot of books where I've worked on a certain title for years, 3 years, 5 years. And there's a certain groove you can get into when you're doing that. And it becomes like this giant novel by the time you're done. And there's something to be said for that too, returning to the same characters and the same world month after month for years and continuing to deepen and expand that world. So both things are attractive each in their own way, you know?
I didn't know too, so because now we collect everything. So because for the trades, is it easier to do it for the trades and stuff?
Yeah, but so you break it up, big deal.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Right? It doesn't
We
matter
were
to me.
spoiled, Phil. That's the problem. We literally had writers that were on books for 10 years,
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
more, and we like you really do kind of get to know a writer that way. And the younger generation just doesn't have that like on new comics. They can go back
Right,
and read
that's
the old
true.
comics.
The readership is also building a relationship with the creators
Mhm.
when you're invested in a long-term series like that.
Well,
When
it's
you
like,
have
yeah, last time we were talking to Kelly Thompson, and she was even saying like it's hard to like if you want to do like a B plot or a C plot in a book now because you might only be there a year, maybe two if
yeah,
you're lucky.
If you're lucky,
yeah, that's true. So subplots were always a big part of
Oh yeah.
comics for a long time, and it's not so much anymore. There was always, you look at those old Lee Ditko Spider-Man stories. There was always so many little plot threads floating around, that sometimes would percolate for months, if not longer, and then they would pay off. And it's a great structural way to tell a story.
Or even like in your era, it's like, oh hey, what's Mary Jane doing at the moment? What's Jameson yelling about at the moment?
Right. You could take the time when you're there every month. You could take the time to sidebar into this and sidebar into that. And then the trick is always to see if you can work those things into the greater theme of what the story is.
Hmm. And I can't remember if I've asked you this before or not, but you probably have no idea. Do you have any idea if you've written more Spider-Man or more Batman?
Oh, I've absolutely written more Spider-Man than Batman. I remembered recently, one of the first things I did at Marvel when I was just dipping my toe in the water, when Jim Shooter would throw me these odd jobs here and there. I wrote plots for France, for a couple of Spider-Man stories for France. Apparently what they would do is they'd have American writers write these plots. They'd get a French artist to draw it, and then a French writer to do the final dialogue. So one of the very first things I ever did for Marvel was Spider-Man. Then I moved on to Marvel Team Up. Then came, Craven's Last Hunt, then 2 years on Spectacular Spider-Man, then another, a couple of years on Spectacular Spider-Man, not to mention all the miniseries and one-shots and all these things over the years, and it never seems to end. So I think if you add it up, it's a lot more Spider-Man. I think probably Justice League stories at DC come close, though. I did a lot of Justice League, and especially when you start adding in Justice League and animation on top of that, I've done a lot of Justice League.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure. I'm like, I think it's Spider-Man, but just with all the animation and Batman showing up in Justice League and stuff, I'm like,
Right, yeah. But I never had a long run on an ongoing Batman book. That's one thing I never got to do. I did, one shots and graphic novels, and Batman was in Justice League, but it wasn't a Batman book per se.
Yeah.
And as you said, a lot of animation to Batman animated movies and Batman Brave and the Bold and Justice League Unlimited. So there has been a lot of Batman, but that it would have been nice to have a long run on an ongoing Batman series. That would have been great.
Never too late.
I was gonna say, are you still interested in a monthly book? Like
we
a
can
month
manifest it.
Yeah, if it's the right book, it's the right character. With Batman, it would be fun. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be fun to do that and immerse myself in that world for a couple of years at least.
Or even if they're like, hey, we'll give you 12 issues of a year of Detective Comics, would you be down for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Now I need this. I need this to happen.
But it's just going to be, 12 issues of Bruce Wayne in therapy. So, come on.
We'll take it, finally.
Yeah, I mean, he needs it. So I was going to say, there's no way you would take Amazing at this point. They do 2 issues a month for Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't say no to anything until the offer shows up, and then I think about it, and we'll see what's what. We'll see. I don't see that offer coming my way, so I'm not really, thinking about it. But you never know. One thing I've learned of doing this for so many years is you never know. It's a very strange thing when you're a freelancer, and especially when you have a long career, because there's always these waves and these ups and these downs, and there have been periods where it's like, guys, I'm out here. I still exist, and they forget, and then all of a sudden, they forget for reasons that you have no idea why, and then they remember you for reasons why you have no idea why, and suddenly the phone is, ringing off the hook again. Which is why, for me, it's always been so important to do a lot of different things, to make sure I'm writing for TV or writing these animated movies or working on a book or just doing different things. Because as a freelancer, I always say you're always tap dancing on quicksand. And you got to tap dance really fast and really well. So A, that you don't sink, and B, that they say, look, that guy tap dances really well. We better hire him to write this, you know. But you got to have as many doors open as you possibly can, because you never know. And often it's for reasons that have nothing to do with you when the work dries up. But sometimes the work just dries up for a period of time. And you got to have another door open to walk through so that you can keep paying the mortgage, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're just like, oh, he's probably working in something else right now. I don't know, would he be interested in this?
Yeah, you don't know. And and it's a funny thing, like, people, it depends on the editor, it depends on, who's in charge of the company that week. You just never know. I've had situations where I've been like so busy, so much work coming at me from a specific company, and then something happened somewhere up the line where the guy in charge decided, nah, we don't like his work anymore for whatever reason. And, in a week's time, all the work goes away, and then so you got to make sure that, like I said, that the other door is open. I learned that lesson early on, that you can't, I learned not to be loyal to a company. You can't be loyal to a company, because what is the company? I've seen 200 different versions of Marvel since I started in this business, and many versions of DC. You're loyal to your collaborators. You're loyal to your editor and to your artist and to the people, but you can't be loyal to a company. A company is just this sort of, I always see the company as like this H.P. Lovecraft kind of entity that's like sucks people in and spits them out, and then sucks more people in and spits them out, and just keeps rolling along, the Marvel that I grew up reading about was not the Marvel that was there when I first started working there in the Jim Shooter era, nor does anything at Marvel today even vaguely resemble the Marvel from when I first started, So you got to focus on the stories and the characters and your collaborators and do the best you can. But being loyal to a company is I think is absurd.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's in any industry. They always show those memes and stuff where we're like, you'll die. If you die, they'll replace you the next day, and after they've called you to say, I know you just died. Are you coming in today?
Right. There was a time in America, many, many years ago, where like people, they get out of college, they get a job at IBM, and they would work there for the rest of their lives. Yeah, exactly. That world doesn't. When I've said several times, it's like now the whole world is like a freelancer, because everybody, freelancers always have sand under their feet. So we always know that nothing is permanent. But if you look at the economy now and the way jobs are and everything, everybody's in that position now.
Oh yeah, yeah. I just had to find a new job after being at the same place for 22 years. Yeah.
Wow. That's got to be difficult. It's got to be really difficult.
It was a strange transition, but yeah, no, I mean, in the end, it worked out better a little.
Oh, that's good. So you landed in a good place. Yeah. That's good. I'm happy to hear that.
But yeah, no, I always thought it was like the license to print money. Like they had to like lure you in there to, because anytime I see a solicit, it's like, oh, J M DeMatteis is back. Come buy this,
Yeah, I'll tell you, Marvel recently seems to be this continuous stream of Spider-Man miniseries, which is fun because I love the character, and I did a little Magneto miniseries in between there too. And I joke because they do these I guess you got to call them nostalgia series, which I kind of hate, but that's kind of what they are. It's set in the past and often set in a period when that particular creator was perhaps doing work with that character. And you've got amazing people working on a lot of these series. Ann Nocenti and so many other wonderful people, Chris Claremont, and all these people doing these series. And I always say, hey, guess what? We're all quite capable of doing stories set in the present continuity. It doesn't just have to be set in the past. We're writers. We can do anything. But people have mindsets. I remember years ago, someone was telling me that they were talking to some editor. And they said, and my name came out. Well, he's the guy that he just says that funny stuff. Like all he knew, this editor knew, was the stuff I did with Keith. And they just saw this one sliver. So you have to constantly reinvent yourself. You have to constantly create new avenues and new opportunities for yourself. And that's why something like the DeMultiverse, that's why for all these years, I've always had creator-owned stuff going while I was doing the Marvel and DC stuff. the TV stuff, the movie stuff, working on a book. I have a new book called Dark Future, which I hope will be out by early next year. A novel, sort of a metaphysical time travel story. Just work in as many different venues as you possibly can, because you never know when that door will close. You just don't. And it's not through anyone's cruelty. It's just the way it works. It's just the way it works. And by doing that, by constantly trying to keep these doors open and reinvent myself and keep new projects going, that's why I'm still here doing this all these years later. If I had just kind of put all my eggs in one basket, that could have been the end of it. I might be doing something else today.
Again, you got to evolve.
Glad you're still here.
Yes, we are.
Thank you. I am too.
But no, those miniseries, those set back in the day, they must sell because they keep doing it.
They keep doing
it.
It's
for more our era now, Phil. Like, we're the ones with the money. Everybody else after us, they don't have disposable income.
I've had a lot of fun with all of them. The last one I did before this, the Shadow of the Green Goblin one, which was like set really early in Spider-Man's career. I had a great time with that one. That was fantastic. Loved working on that.
All right. Should we let this man go, Lilith?
Absolutely. Let's let him get back to work or enjoy a Saturday, whatever comes first.
Yeah, I think it's going to be enjoying a Saturday today. I think. Yeah.
Oh, he's taking time off from writing. Jeez.
Yeah, I know. I made a decision some years back. Back in the day, sometimes I would, I'd just be working constantly. It didn't matter if it was Saturday, Sunday, and I made a decision at a certain point that the weekends are sacred, and I am not going to work on Saturday and Sunday unless if there's some, deadline that is so tight that I have to do it. Otherwise, the weekend is for me to just enjoy life and hang out with my wife and,
work-life balance. I highly encourage it.
Exactly.
You need downtime. It'll burn yourself out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, not to sound old, but when you're younger, burning yourself out, that's okay. I don't need to do that. I've done that. I've done that thing where I'm like working and working and working and working and working. Yeah, I'll take on 72 different projects and get them all in by next week. I've done that. I don't need to do that anymore. I really don't.
No, you do not. All right. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Always great to talk to you.
Is there anything you have out or coming out that we haven't hit upon today?
Let me think. Okay, we got the Spider-Man thing. We got all these collected editions. Dr. Fate is out. There's a new edition of Moonshadow out. Spectacular Spider-Man. Coming out in a couple of weeks is a new edition of Brooklyn Dreams, which is my autobiographical graphic novel, one of my favorite things I've ever done. Scooby Apocalypse is out. There's going to be Hero Square, the creator-owned series I did with Keith Giffen. There's going to be the Omnibus will be out also in October. So a lot of that. I've got this book, Dark Future, which should be out, hope by early next year. I've got the Batman Cape Crusader coming up. Oh, and Kevin McGuire and I don't know if you're familiar with the Minor Threats universe over at Dark Horse that Patton Oswalt does. Patton Oswalt and his partner Jordan Blum have created this whole superhero universe at Dark Horse called I just said what the name was, Minor Threats there. And they've invited different creators to come in and contribute to their universe. So Kevin and I are doing a one-shot. First time I've worked with Kevin in years. So I'm really, really excited about that. We created a whole bunch of new characters and with a nice humorous JLI slant to it. So I'm looking forward to that one too. So I think that's enough for now, yeah?
I think, yes. Yes. All right, everyone. The very prolific J M DeMatteis. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Oh, you too.